Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Millennials, Xers, and Boomers, How to Capitalize on Where and When They Shop Online, sponsored by Slice Intelligence. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joe Geggin. I'm the Content Studio Coordinator here at Digiday, and I'll be your moderator today. In just a few moments, we'll be joined by Ken Kassar, Principal Analyst at Slice Intelligence, where he oversees the development of the company's analytic solutions. Ken brings a rich online retail background to Slice. Most recently, Ken was Senior Vice President of Media Analytics Solutions at Nielsen, where he developed innovative digital commerce, measurement, and advertising effectiveness solutions. Prior to Nielsen, Ken was an analyst at Jupiter Research, where he was an early thought leader, trusted advisor, and media source on e-commerce. He'll guide us through how each generation shops online and how marketers and brands can use that information to their advantage this holiday season. A question and answer period will follow our presentation, so please stay through to the end. Feel free to submit questions at any time via our chat interface. At some point tomorrow, you'll receive an email with a recording of the webinar and a link to download the slides. And if you're tweeting about today's webinar, please use the hashtag #SliceIntelligence. We're going to ask a couple of poll questions off the top here just to get people's feedback on a couple of things. And then we'll toss it to Ken. So I'm going to go ahead and launch those polls now. We'll give you guys about a minute or two to go over that, and I'm going to toss it back to Ken. So Ken, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks a lot, Joe. Good afternoon, or good morning for those on the West Coast. Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to be working with Digiday on this webinar. As retailers and brands and as shoppers, the holiday season is one that resonates pretty strongly with us now. And in case you haven't been paying attention, it's just around the corner. We're about 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving, 2 weeks and a day from Black Friday. On a less seasonal note, there has been a lot of focus lately on millennials, largely because it appears that they have now outnumbered the boomers, and they're the largest generation in the U.S. today. So we thought it'd be interesting to try to take those two together and see and try to understand what millennials and more broadly what different generations are doing during the holiday season. So I may be getting old, but I do find myself impressed nearly daily with what's available to us technologically. Just Sunday, in my Sunday newspaper, the New York Times included a cardboard virtual reality kit that you could slip your cell phone into. And watch an immersive virtual reality story about 3 displaced children, and it actually worked. It worked really well. And this was made with cardboard and a cell phone. More topically, when I go to Zappos and look at a pair of shoes but don't buy, odds are later on that day I'm going to see ads virtually on every website that I go to with pictures of that pair of shoes. When we look at the online merchandising space, technology is endemic as well, doing things that we used to rely on people to make manual choices around. When I go to Netflix, movies and television shows are recommended based upon ones that I've watched in the past. When I go to Amazon, products are recommended to me based upon those that have been made in the past, and generally they work pretty well. Yet we still think about generations. It seems like every 20 years or so, Time magazine has a cover story looking at generations. I don't know whether it's when it's a slow news week or whether there's something else driving it. But amongst demographic segments, generations and age seem to be the one that kind of catch our fascination pretty continuously. It's with the boomers, there was a big focus on them because there were so many boomers, and then with Gen X we focused on them because they were next, and then with millennials, they're next, but more importantly there are a lot of them. Again, they're the biggest generation now. And when you think about it, there's it might be easy to to dismiss the relevancy of demographics, of age-based, of intelligence based upon age and intelligence based upon generations, given the sophisticated tools that are available to us digitally. But given that we're all in the business of fulfilling consumer needs and wants, I think that we'd probably be crazy to dismiss the notion of where we come from is irrelevant to how we view the world and how we shop and what we buy. We look at the worldview of millennials that have come of age in a post-September 11th world. That grew up with smartphones in their hands, to Gen X, which was really the first generation to embrace digital, from the cell phone to the iPhone, and really the first generation to embrace the PC, to baby boomers that gave us the PC, put a man on the moon, and really came of age during a post-war boom that really continues to define us. It seems like there've got to be important things to understand with these folks. So as I'd said before, millennials are now the largest generation, and when we look at projections from Pew, we're anticipating that there will be more millennials than every other generation for the foreseeable future, at least for the next generation. We've got to balance this, though, with the fact that the spending power of millennials and of younger people in general is lower than the spending power of older people. We tend to reach our peak income period between the ages of 35 and 44. Our peak spending between the ages of 35 and 54, and so when we look at millennials and we look at how much they spend, it's not a function of them sitting around their parents' living rooms not working. That's not the case. It's just a function of the fact that they haven't yet come into their peak spending. Now, before we get into the Slice data, looking at the holiday season, we want to give you a little bit of a background on Slice and where our data comes from, where we're coming from. This is probably an image that is going to make sense for some people and maybe not for others. If you see data in the upper right-hand corner of the slide and you immediately know that that's the new Star Trek, then you're probably a Gen Xer, maybe a Boomer. But we're living in a world of big data. Retailers, to a great extent, and brands to a lesser extent, have a lot of data available to them about what people are doing with them. And a lot of those folks we talk to tell us that they're kind of drowning in all of the internal data that's available to them. We're founded on the idea, though, that as important as that stuff is, we acknowledge it's extremely important, that there's a really important set of data that hadn't been available before. That's market-level, consumer-centric data that track what people buy online. And is able to get visibility into the consumer. We think that it's critical for both retailers and brands to understand not just how their business is doing, but to be able to contextualize it against what's going on in the rest of the world. If at the end of the year you find that your sales have grown by 12%, it's really, really tough to say that that's good or that's bad unless you have some context as to how your competitors are doing, and that would go to category by category. The problem that we're solving is that we believe that the measurement approaches that worked in the offline world aren't working in the online world, and we needed to find a different approach. We needed to find an innovative approach to be able to get at that. So here's what we've built. We've developed a panel of 3 million people. Yes, 3 million in the U.S. It's a panel that leverages consumer permissioned access to consumers' electronic receipts. It allows us to passively see everything that they're buying. So the consumer doesn't have to do anything in order to tell us that they bought a toaster from Amazon. We're able to see it through their receipts. We're pioneers in the space, and we've developed a pretty sophisticated set of technologies, tools, practices that allow us to take receipts that are relatively unstructured, to turn them into structured data, and then to extrapolate that to the broader U.S. online shopping population. It's really an innovative approach to trying to create a set of data that retailers and manufacturers are accustomed to working with in the offline world. Think of it as a happy confluence of two different kinds of geeks. Silicon Valley geeks with machine learning and technology experience, and market research geeks with an appreciation for the traditional approaches that have worked over the years, and a willingness to find new ways to employ new technologies to get there. So before I go any farther and before we show some data, Joe, could you give us a quick recap of the survey results? I'm curious as to where the votes landed on our two questions.
Sure thing, Ken. So for the first poll question, which generation accounts for the largest share of online purchases during the holiday season? The majority of people, 54%, said Generation X, with a substantial section, 40%, saying Millennials.
Okay.
And for the second, would you like to respond to that or go on to the second question?
Yeah, let's hear the second one as well.
Sure. Which generation spends the least per buyer during the holiday season? 61% said the silent generation.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Excellent. So it's good to see that everyone's instincts are in line with my own. That's around what I probably would have guessed as well. And so if we're being completely honest with ourselves, the way we think about how different ages and different generations shop is, we've probably got biases. I think we assume that older people struggle with technology and don't use it as a result of that, and that younger people live in a completely digital world, popping off purchases like Pez. But when we look at the data, it's interesting. There are a lot of things that we find when we look at it that sort of underscores assumptions that we had made, but there are a lot of things that are different. Like, for example, the share of spending by generation. So it's actually the baby boomers that account for the largest share of total spending, followed by Gen X, followed by Millennials. Silents indeed spend the least in aggregate, accounting for 8% of total online holiday shopping spend. When we unpack that a bit, I'm sorry, just one other point I wanted to make on this. I think a really important takeaway from this, and one that I don't want to let slip to later in the presentation, is this idea that I think that a lot of us that have kind of been in the space for a while have just become habituated to think about, oh, internet is where young people shop, and I think that the data is increasingly starting to show us that it really has become mainstreamed. If you're doing all of your online holiday shopping online this year, or if you're doing all of your holiday shopping online this year, you're not all that unique anymore. 10 years ago, you were unique. That would be interesting fodder at a cocktail party this year. There are a lot of people that do that, and it really has spread pretty broadly. Now let's unpack though the spend. So again, the one thing I do want to remind you that the data we're looking at is November 1st, 2014 through December 31st, 2014. And so first of all, let's look at spend per person. So the group that spends the most per person is Gen X, followed by baby boomers, followed by silent, by millennial. In my mind, there are a lot of surprises in this data. First of all, I would have expected that millennials would have spent more than anyone else, and that indeed was not the case. And it probably comes back to the fact that millennials don't have the buying power of the older generations. The Gen X spends the most per person. The reason with baby boomers that we see a slightly lower spend per person, but in aggregate such a big spend, is because there's so many boomers. Probably the most surprising thing on this slide, though, is the spend amongst the silent generation. We know from the previous slide that they don't all shop online, but amongst those that do, the spending is significant. They actually spend quite a bit more than even millennials. Moving over, when we look at purchase frequency, I think the story there is that there's not much of a story. So yeah, Gen Xers make about one more purchase over the course of the holiday shopping season than Millennials, but this is in a pretty narrow range. The purchase frequency doesn't really distinguish itself all that significantly. Average order size is in a similarly narrow band with the exception of Millennials. With Millennials, average order size at $42.78, it comes in quite a bit below everybody else, particularly the boomers. And then finally, and actually I think this is the other really interesting nugget from this slide, and that's the number of merchants shopped. I think there's a bias that Millennials are less loyal. We're not looking at brand loyalty here. We're looking at merchant loyalty. But from a merchant loyalty standpoint, what we're finding is that all generations are roughly equivalent. During the course of the holiday season, they all shop between 2.6 and 2.7 merchants during the course of the season. Maybe a little bit of a surprise, but I think for those that that have done research, kind of getting into millennials' heads, I think that that there really is more loyalty than we might instinctively give them credit for. Now we're going to take a step up. So we're not looking at generations anymore. We're looking at total shopping behavior. Here what we've done is we've overlaid 2013 over 2014 and kind of aligned around Black Friday. And so we see is that the timing of holiday shopping is relatively similar on a year-to-year basis. What we see, and we expect that what we saw in 2014 and 2013 is probably what we're going to see in 2015, roughly from a timing standpoint. We're in the thick of this preseason period right now, where merchants are this year, just like last year, starting to compete with each other to try to get people buying earlier and earlier. Then we have a 5-day peak season that starts on Thanksgiving and runs through to Cyber Monday. Very, very spiky, much more spiky than we see in the offline world. If you just look at the delta between the pre-holiday and the core holiday periods offline, you would be amazed at how much more spiky online is. Then we've got a late peak period where people are still buying heavily that culminates right around December 15th. It's 2 Mondays before Christmas that we see one last spike, and then we start to see sales trail off into last minute. So the question is, how does this vary by generation? Are there significant variances? And the answer, there's not a lot of variation. When we kind of ignore the height of the different bars within each of the segments, because we have different amounts of time in each of those. But when we look at the bars relative to each other, we see that there's no generation that is really buying particularly early or particularly late. Everyone is buying at roughly the same at roughly the same time. Another similarity, much like this young fella, who I think probably isn't quite a millennial yet. I don't know if we've got a name for his generation, but even that generation, that nameless generation, doesn't like shipping and handling charges. And when we look at the percent of orders that go out with free shipping and handling and cut it by generation during the holiday season, we see that 86-87% of orders go out without shipping and handling during holidays. So for merchants that might have been hoping that there's a particular generation that they might be able to get away with less aggressive shipping and handling promotions, the data unfortunately does not support you on that score. Now we're going to take a look, and again, we're stepping up and looking at all shoppers, not cut by a particular generation, and we're looking at holiday 2014. During that period, and when we cut sales up by different types of retailers, we see that pure play retailers account for about 2/3 of all sales, followed by big box at 15%, department store retailers, and then mall type stores. So think Justice, Abercrombie, Gap. Now, if we took Amazon out of the mix, obviously Amazon is a significant player. The pure play share goes a bit below 50%, and the big box share goes up to about 22%. So what's clear is that big box retailers, other than Amazon, are material players out there. And when we look at them, the top big box retailers retailers' online websites during the holiday period is populated with a roster of companies that we know and love. And by big box, we mean 50,000 square foot plus stores, freestanding generally. Probably the biggest difference you'll see is that Walmart is certainly the leading destination offline during the holiday season, whereas Best Buy online has got an edge there. What does that look like by generation, though? What do we see amongst the big box retail segment by generation? The answer is that it's even more dominated by those that are 45 plus, who account for 68% of all sales during the holiday period. So it does make it, if you're sitting at Target or Walmart right now, and you're thinking about your digital strategy and you're correlating that with youth and cultivating youth, know that that is a fine thing to do, and it's a perfectly good tactic for getting at younger people. However, you got to be cognizant of the fact that it's the 45 plus folks that are actually generating the vast majority of your sales today, probably tomorrow as well. So the next thing we wanted to look at is to dig into some of the differences and the nuances and some of the similarities across categories and across merchants that we've observed. So there are really four things that we looked at. The first was we wanted to look at which categories generate the most dollars during the holiday season, so just gross dollars. Secondly, we wanted to see which categories saw the biggest holiday spikes, which categories went from relatively flat to really spiky during that November to December time period. We also wanted to see which merchants particularly resonated with particular generations during the holiday period, both based upon their sales volume as well as based upon kind of the uniqueness factor, the generations that are uniquely buying from them. So first, similarities, and the similarities are pretty significant. Whether we're looking at millennials, Gen X, boomers, or the silent generation, the top three categories in this order, number one, number two, number three, for each of those generations is electronics number one, apparel relatively close at number two, and then home and kitchen trailing by a fairly significant degree. The categories that pop the most, that see the biggest holiday pop, are the same for each of those generations. Photos and paper products, think Shutterfly, Moo, folks like that, the folks that you go to have Christmas cards or holiday cards printed with pictures of your kids. Pop the most, followed by toys and games, followed by gift certificates. It's interesting, toys and games is actually the 10th biggest category overall. What distinguishes toys and games isn't its size, it's more the how much the category appears out of nowhere during the holiday period. From a merchant standpoint, when we look at the top 10 merchants across every generation, there are 7 that show up for every generation. Amazon is the biggest for every generation. Best Buy is the next biggest for every generation, and then we have a little bit of scuffling for third, fourth, fifth, and sixth place. But Best Buy, Apple, iTunes, Nordstrom's, Macy's, and Walmart show up in the top 10 for every generation. So again, the similarities are pretty material. The differences are interesting, though, and I think that a lot of the actionability really comes from a focus on the differences. First of all, let's look at the categories that are uniquely shopped by millennials. The health and beauty category is, for most generations, the 4th biggest category during the holiday period. Uniquely so for millennials. They uniquely spend on that category during the holidays. Home improvement is another pretty big category for everybody. Uniquely so, though, amongst millennials. And then the categories that pop for millennials that really don't pop for other generations are baby products and tickets and events. I think the other now kind of jumping over to the merchants, there are really kind of 3 trends that you see when you look at, or 3 themes that you see when you look at the group of merchants that are the most impactful to millennials. One theme is mobile first. They're sites that really aren't computer based. Many of them were conceived as mobile applications, and there's a heavy dose of subscription in there. We look at from the mobile first theme, we've got Lyft, Uber, Fandango, Grubhub. From the subscription theme, we've got Shave Mob, Dollar Shave Club, Birchbox, Trunk Club, Goodmouth. For those of you that don't know, Goodmouth is a monthly oral care subscription program. Make sure you don't use a toothbrush longer than you should. And so while a theme that I've kind of been beating possibly to death throughout is that millennials aren't as significant as spenders as older generations. The one thing that's apparent is that for those that are in emerging categories, particularly those that are in mobile subscription type categories, millennials are the most important generation out there, both from a revenue standpoint as well as from a momentum standpoint. And so there are absolutely folks that are listening today where millennials are the most important folks out there, despite the relatively lower spending power. Gen X, my generation. What we see here are, well, first of all, everybody buys electronics. Again, it's the #1 category by generation. It pops more though for Gen X than it does for any other generation. Photo and paper products pops for all generations, but it really, really pops here. These are the folks where their spending looks the most like parents buying gifts for children. And then finally, sports and outdoors. That is a category that really doesn't pop for other generations. That does pop a bit for Gen X. When we look at the merchants that they uniquely buy from, one big theme is clearly kids. We've got Gymboree, Children's Place, Scholastic, Justice. But another theme is full-service grocery, which is not intuitive until you step back and look at some of the different indicators you see on this generation as being possibly time-starved. I can empathize with that, and between the ability to buy online and services like Peapod, Amazon Fresh that make their lives a little bit easier. It seems like there may actually be an opportunity during the holiday season to entice folks to embrace new things in the interest of saving time. When we look at the boomers, the category that pops for boomers is apparel. Again, it pops for everybody, but especially for boomers. Flowers and gifts, what we might think of as kind of a traditional holiday category, doesn't really pop for most categories. The more traditional, quote-unquote, gifting categories don't generate as much revenue online as you might think. But the boomers, and as we'll see, the silent generation do kind of uniquely buy into those categories. The thing that really strikes me when I look at the list of merchants that are uniquely bought by boomers is that the online shopping experience is really the offline shopping experience just ported over to online. They're buying from Amazon. Every one of these generations, Amazon is the #1 merchant that they buy from. But once you get past Amazon, you see television native or television selling native folks like QVC and HSN. You see native catalog companies like J. Jill, Talbot's, Garnet Hill, and so it really does seem to be like these are the folks that have kind of embraced the retailers that they know and love, and they've just moved together toward the digital realm. Another indication that the baby boomers may not be as time starved as Gen X is the fact that not just Big Fish Games, but other casual gaming sites we do see uniquely strong amongst the boomers, even during the frantic holiday season. Finally, the silent generation. There aren't as many of them that buy online, but those that do spend quite a bit. One thing that's really interesting, when we look at all other generations, about 55% of sales are generated by women, 45% by men. That's probably not quite as significant a difference as we see in the brick and mortar world, where I think we all assume that a higher percent of brick and mortar sales come from women. But when we look at silent generation, it is interesting that the men do indeed account for 55% of spending or so. The categories that they uniquely buy are gift cards and like everybody else, but particularly gift cards, flowers and gifts, again, just like the boomers, movies and TV, and appliances pop amongst the silent generation, and we really don't see them pop amongst other generations. When we look at themes across merchants, we see, first there's nutraceuticals, which probably don't have anything to do with holiday gift giving. At least I'm hoping that I'm not getting nutraceuticals for my parents for Christmas this year. But we also see, a set of merchants in there that are they're off-price merchants, and in some cases off-brand merchants. Check out meritline.com. Which is which sells very deeply discounted products of generally from brands that you haven't heard of before. This is a group that whose shopping behavior really does kind of stand out as a bit different from everybody else's. So so I think let's kind of take a look. So we sort of talked through a bunch of data. Let's take a step back now and think about what it means, sort of what some of the takeaways are. The first takeaway is that, and probably the most important one, is that there are more similarities than there are differences between the online shopping habits of different generations. And so the implication there is, don't fool yourself into thinking that online is all about young people. It's about everyone, and actually in general, older shoppers account for the bulk of spending. Number two, the big exception there is the mobile first and subscription businesses, which are distinctly driven by millennials. So if you're a brand, if you're a merchant that's seeking to kind of cultivate shoppers that are kind of or if you're playing in the mobile first and subscription world, the millennials are going to be really, really important to you. But I think it does also call out the opportunity that there are older generations that this stuff is going to creep to. The Gen X is probably the next logical because they're the next younger generation, and also because they seem to be time starved, and subscriptions and some of the mobile first applications do seem to play well toward that need. Average order size. Millennials come in with pretty significantly lower average order sizes than other generations. I think the key finding there is we know how important shipping and handling is to everybody, or free shipping and handling is to everybody. I would say that if you're a merchant and millennials compose a significant portion of your customer base, you've got to be really careful about the minimum order sizes that you set when you're setting shipping and handling discounts. We see sort of a divergence between Target and Walmart. I believe it's Walmart that is maintaining a $50 minimum order size to qualify for free shipping and handling. Target has done away with the minimum average order size. There's going to be a cost to that. There are going to be some orders that they lose money on, and so in the push and pull of which makes more sense, just know that that with millennials there could be some loss if you're not super aggressive on your floor for shipping and handling. Number four, when we look at our traditional holiday gift shopping categories, gift cards, flowers, and such, it is older shoppers that are buying in these categories, and so if there's ever a place to either segment your audience from your own internal CRM database, or to buy media based upon age. These are probably the categories where you're going to get the biggest lift if you can indeed effectively focus on those older audiences. And then finally, when we look at Gen X, their shopping behaviors reflect the scarcity of time, and for those that are uniquely selling into that generation, and probably for those that are uniquely selling into parents, services like click and collect or buy online, pick up in store, gift suggestions, gift wrapping are going to resonate, and also there may be kind of a surprising opportunity for customer acquisition amongst those in the full service grocery space at that time period. So before we get to questions, I just wanted to I'll actually leave you on the thank you slide. If anyone has questions that they prefer not to ask today, feel free to shoot me an email. Simply enough, Ken@Slice. If you the folks from Digiday will be sending the slides out to everyone, but in the event that you don't get them, Steve@slice.com will be more than happy to help you out. If you'd like to learn about what our offerings look like, you can definitely shoot us a note at sales@slice.com. And then finally, I'd encourage you to check out our blog. Every couple of days, we put sometimes nuggets, sometimes pretty significant pieces of work out there, and during the holiday season, obviously, we're going to be paying pretty close attention to what's going on. So I'd encourage you all to keep up with us there. So Joe, that's it for the prepared content. If there are any questions you'd like to lob my way, now's probably a good time.
Great, let's do it. Okay, for the first question that came in here, referring to the pie chart with the share of online holiday sales by generation, how does that compare with the other 10 months of the year?
Yeah, so it is very similar. There's a point that shifts here and there between generations if I look at January 1st to October 31st, but the shifts, but the pie chart looks largely the same.
Great. Another one here. I'm surprised to hear that millennials don't spend as much on electronics during the holiday season. Can you explain?
Yeah, it is the category that they spend more on than any other category, but it's a lot closer to apparel for them. My guess is that the electronics category is heavily driven by large ticket items like iPhones and tablets and such, and that may be beyond the means of many millennials to buy. So yeah, so that's my guess. But I wouldn't mistake it to say that they're not buying electronics. They are, and they're buying more electronics than they are any other category. It's just that other generations are allocating a larger share of their holiday spend toward electronics.
Gotcha. And we just had another question come in. How do sales break out by gender, by generation? Is online as female-dominated as offline?
Yeah. So I remember hearing an offline rule of thumb that 80% of sales are driven by women in the offline world. I don't think that is true. I don't even know that that's been true since 1950 or so. But I do believe that in the offline world, women spend more. So we know that across most generations, roughly 55% of spending comes from women, 45% from men. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say that it's probably a larger share when we look at offline, but still, women define spending across categories, across generations.
Great, thank you. And another question here from Lori. What is the best day to send an email out to promote a Black Friday sale?
It's an interesting one. And I'm going to jump back a few slides. So I think a lot of you will recall that last year there was a lot of competition amongst merchants to get promotions out early. Uh, and um, and what was interesting to me is that it didn't seem to work all that well. So when we compare 2013 to 14, and we look at the timing of sales by day, there really wasn't a difference. When we look at the week before Thanksgiving, we saw that sales were about 4% higher than they were in 2013. But then when we looked at the peak season, Black Friday in particular, we saw that sales were 15 or 16% lower than the year before. So it seems like there was just a shift in total spending. So you know my takeaway from that is that I think consumers are kind of inclined to buy when their internal calendar tells them to, and I think if I were a merchant, I'd be a little bit careful about. I think I'd be a little bit careful about trying to drive sales too early, because there's the possibility that you may just be a little bit ahead of the consumer curve, and that some of the impact of those promotions may be lost in those two really big peaks that we see on Black Friday and Cyber Monday.
Great. Another question just came in here. Assuming the gift cards purchased by Xers and Silence are given to the younger generations, any idea what those gift cards are being used to buy? Is it similar to what they're already buying online?
That's a great question. That would be an excellent follow-up to look at in our post-holiday postmortem. I think I think there probably would be some really interesting stories in that. So thank you. We'll squirrel that one away for later.
Great. Another question here. Is there any data on purchase return rates by generation?
Another great question. We don't parse return receipts, so we at this point in time. We would have the ability to, and we have done a little bit of work on a merchant by merchant basis to look at it, but we haven't done that and cut it up by generation. Again, thank you for a great suggestion. That'd be a really interesting follow up.
That same person asks, "What's your gut feeling on the matter?"
So my gut feeling is probably that return rates are going to be highest amongst the and if we're looking at the redeemers of those cards, I'm guessing that they're going to be highest amongst younger shoppers, because we know that apparel is a big category, and we know that sizing is a tricky issue, and that sizing tends to be the biggest cause of returns. So if I had to guess, I'd say that the apparel category is probably going to suffer from returns in gift cards more than anybody else, but that's just an educated guess.
Great. Any other questions from the audience? Give you guys a couple minutes to get them in here. As a reminder, you can use the chat interface to submit a question. We can see it come up right on the side here. Okay. It looks like that may be all for today. Oh, here we go. Here, just one came in. How do you factor in luxury? Are there changes to how the generations interact with luxury buying?
Yeah, we have looked at that space a bit, and depending upon the luxury category that you're working in, that there are different age cohorts that will matter most. I mean, obviously in the luxury segment in general, female versus male tends to be the driver, but not exclusively. And Gen X tends to do particularly well because they tend to be a little bit more connected or a little bit more interested, and they tend to have the disposable income to do something about it. But there's I do think that there's a whole heck of a lot of research that can be done to learn more about that.
Great, thank you for that question, Patrick. Another question here. We see on the slide here that year over year, 2013 to 2014, a slight dip on the total sales for Black Friday. Is Black Friday still larger than Cyber Monday in terms of sales, and is that a trend that you expect to see continue this year?
Well, in 2014, Cyber Monday was the biggest day. It was in 2013 that they were basically tied with each other. It's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out this year. We're seeing more and more effort amongst brick and mortar retailers whose selling cycles are very much tied to Black Friday. And so you have to think that there's going to be more and more energy from the brick and mortar segment toward Black Friday. But folks like Amazon are recognizing that and are trying to get ahead of it in terms of their promotional schedules and such. But Cyber Monday is a brilliant thing. I mean, that is a holiday that was essentially invented by Shop.org, a retail organization trade group, back in the late 90s, early O's. That when they recognized that the day of the week that people were most likely to shop was Monday, because they got back to the office where they had a broadband connection after a weekend on narrowband, and they hopefully at lunchtime frantically did all their shopping. And so we fast forward to where we are today. And we all have broadband connections. Well, most of us have broadband connections at home as well as at work. Yet the promotion is really stuck. I mean, it really is outside of maybe Valentine's Day, it's got to be one of the most successful manufactured holidays out there.
Great, thanks for that insight. We have two questions here that can sort of be rolled into one. How do mobile and social play into holiday purchasing? Any unexpected findings?
Yeah, so with receipts, with electronic receipts as we capture them, we're not able to differentiate whether a purchase came in on a mobile device or PC. The research that I've seen elsewhere, certainly suggests that mobile is growing and that it will account for roughly half of digital sales this year, and that is particularly the case amongst millennials. From a social perspective, I think that the work that I've seen has suggested that social has become an important feeder, an important promotional feeder. Part of that has to do with the dominance of Facebook as a media platform and as an ad sales platform. But we are starting to see some really, really interesting initiatives from folks like Pinterest and Instagram to try to monetize consumers' social interest. My gut is that this year, the social impact is largely going to be the impact of advertising that runs on Facebook, Twitter, and other social platforms. But that we will start to see, as well as a lot of the organic, just word of mouth that tends to filter through social networks. But I'm going to be curious to see whether we start to see some impact from the buy buttons that are increasingly popping up in social. I think that it's early. I wouldn't expect that it's going to have a huge impact this year, but I do think that we may look back at this year as a bit of a breakout.
Great. And here's a great question. Do you have insights into what type of promotion works best for each generation? For example, % off discounts, free shipping, gift with purchase, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. That is one that we will be addressing. we're not quite there, but we I would keep an eye on the blog. I think you'll see some insights over that in the months to come.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ken. If there aren't any questions, that'll about do it for us today.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Joe.
Great. Thank you, Ken. And of course, thank you to our sponsor, Slice Intelligence. And thank all of you for attending Millennials, Xers, and Boomers, How to Capitalize on Where and When They Shop Online. Keep an eye on your inboxes for a link to the recorded webinar, as well as the slide share, which you should have at some point tomorrow. All right. Thank you guys very much, and have a great rest of your day.